right, we can get started. I know a lot of you are joining from various different time zones. So like always, thank you for making it work and joining us. We have a packed agenda today. We have the first topic as a dataset lineage design, which Daniel and Marcos from Lyft are going to present. After that, we have a discussion topic around how various community members deploy Amundsen. And at the end, we'll have 5 minutes for any open questions. I'll start off with one announcement. Some of you may have seen a blog post floating around, but the TLDR of that post is that I recently left Lyft to start my own company, and I wanted to share that with the community and also say that I'm actually still very involved in open source. In fact, I will be even more involved in open source, and that was a big motivation for me to do that. So I will, still continue to work with you in the community and continue collaborating there. But if you have any questions, let me know on the Slack channel. Cool. With that, we can go to the next topic, which is dataset lineage design. I'm going to pass it on to Daniel and Marcos.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, hi all. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. In Amundsen, we try to offer the best tool for data discovery. Part of the context of data comes with its flow from one level to another. However, right now, we don't have a way of surfacing the source of data in our application. Data lineage gives visibility to the origin of data, while greatly simplifying the ability to trace errors back to the root cause. And all this kind of data analytics process. So today we're gonna present our plans to implement data lineage at Amundsen. The first, we're gonna talk about table level lineage. So here's kind of our current user interface for in the kind of table detail page. And here you see we are introducing a new link that is called table lineage with this nice icon. So we thought about different options, but we landed on the option that you kind of click on this one and we are sent to a kind of more almost full screen experience that consists of a network graph that with the current table in the center. And here we see the upstream and the downstream kind of data sources for that table. Here on the right side, you can see the details of the selected node. And then this kind of drawer, on the right, it can be collapsed. We will use those kind of chevron arrows to collapse it. So you can just go about it, kind of explore without with extra space. And then whenever you want, you can open back that drawer. And also it has a couple of tabs, like one up one level and down one level. That will give you a really small view of what the next node is. Here on the bottom, you can also see, let me put the pointer. Here in the bottom, you can also see kind of a zoom slide, kind of a, slider, you can call this one. Well, and then this button is going to be kind of centering the screen on the selected node. In the next one, so when we click on those nodes, they will expand, and then it will give you again the details of the node that is selected. And we have the links for Airflow, for GitHub. We have some tags and the status of Airflow. And also the kind of the usual stuff like the owners and all the metadata like tags. Then here on this one, we just keep on going down. And here we have a small tooltip as well that you can hover over it and see the status of those kind of when was the last updated for that node, for that table. Also, we can see here when there is a failed status, it kind of traces back to where it's coming. And that's kind of all for the table lineage. So on the technical side, we're gonna try to create these with D3 JS. We're gonna create a kind of network chart, and then try to have this canvas on one side and kind of being very interactive and hopefully really cool. We are really excited about this. And now Daniel is going to take over and talk about the downstream and the column lineage.
Hi everyone, hope you know who I am, Daniel. Just can you go back one slide? I just have
Yes.
a quick point about this. So the point here is to be able to see the kind of the dependencies tree of your data set and to quickly see the status. So once we're able to integrate task level lineage into our table level lineage, I think that combination of the two will be very powerful to help you see kind of the entire status of all of your DAGs. And so kind of, I think the task level lineage integration will come later. So the table level lineage will come first, and then we'll add task level lineage later. And this is something that we can do. I think that is very powerful. And we can, for example, rerun a DAG that has failed within Amundsen with some sort of integration there. I think this is for an operational use case where users, instead of flipping between many different tools to try to like pin down a problem and fix it, they can just do everything from one place. All right, next slide. Here's another use case where we want to notify downstream users about some sort of change that's coming or some sort of breakage that's coming. And hopefully we can prevent breakages from happening in the future because of changes. So this is one of the biggest pain points that we've discovered from our user interviews. Next slide. So at the top right here, we have this notify user owners button. And that'll, if you click on it, it'll bring you a modal, right? And it's pretty simple, very similar to our request description modal. There's an option here about how many owners you want to notify, which is kind of 1 level down, 2 level down, or all levels down. I think this particular interaction will need some work. We have an alternative here, and then we'll default the message with some sort of text about why you're receiving this email and what table is affected with links. And then obviously the user will be able to customize that message to say exactly why they're sending the email. Next slide. So here's another example of the same modal, except instead of having the options of choosing like what granularity you want to send the email to, it just sends it down to 1 level. We have some feedback that sending it down to like every downstream owner of like multiple levels down is not really a great idea. Assuming that you make a breaking change in one data set, if everyone at 1 level down takes care of that issue and manages that change, then hopefully no one else downstream of that will have to make a change. But there's probably other use cases where it might be useful. I'd like to get more feedback on this. If anyone here would like to chime in about this use case, feel free to reach out or send a message or something. Yeah, this is kind of the reverse side of the first use case, which is tracking down the source of a problem. This is like preventing the problems from happening in the first place. All right, next slide. So then the last thing we want to do, not necessarily in priority order, is tackle column level lineage. We also have feedback that a lot of the use cases are centered around columns. or like, let's say one specific column is broken or one specific metric is broken, rather than like an entire table is broken. Next slide. So very similarly to table level lineage, you can see here on the column, when you hover over, it'll show an icon. And when you click on it, it should take you to a full screen view, just like the table level lineage. There's a few minor changes that I'd like to go over. So on the top left, there's a table name, and then on the right of that is a drop down with like a selection. So you can switch between any individual column in this table or the full table. And then on the right side panel, you see kind of the details about that column, the description, and then something that might be very useful is like the source query that generates this specific column. There's going to be a lot of work trying to figure out like what parts of the query, or like where do we get this query information from. Hopefully, I think users want to see like, how did this get generated? Is it just like a straight up copy from another column, or it's some modification going to it? Next slide. Yeah, I think that's it as far as lineage goes. Open to any questions. I know we had some in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead, people, ask your questions. I'll just let you do that.
Is this feature in production? What are the requirements to use lineage? So no, this is, we've gone through like a planning and design phase. We have yet to do the integration. I think our plan is to start lineage probably in Q1.
Yeah.
So it looks like Allison already answered that.
Daniel, quick question. So you said whenever there is a table that's broken, you'd send a message. Is this an email message, or is it a PagerDuty to the on-call?
Right. So we are not planning to integrate with PagerDuty, and the breakages are, there's no automatic message planned for right now. It's, I think you get notified by PagerDuty that something is broken. And then in order to fix it, you come to Amundsen and you can look at the lineage graph to see, okay, this pipeline is broken and it's causing this table to fail. This table failure is causing this table to fail, which is causing my original problem. So I need to go fix the upstream problem first. So I think the workflow that people have at Lyft right now is that when they get that failure, they have to like track the failure up manually using different tools. And that is like an efficiency like bottleneck, where the faster you can fix a problem, you can mitigate quicker. So if it takes like an hour to trace a problem, then that's an hour that your breakage is still ongoing. If you can fix it an hour quicker, you know, obviously that would reduce like the errors that you encounter, or you're missing data, or whatever backfill you need to do later. Yeah, and then the notification is just like, I'm planning to make a change and I want to tell people to make sure that they cover it. I hear a lot of people send emails to like eng all, and it's like, if you use this table, please read this. And then people, you know, don't end up reading it, or they don't acknowledge that, you know, that they have made this change. So it's a big mess where people just kind of ignore those emails. I personally can't bother to read all of them. There's just too many. Yeah, so it's like a proactive, targeted messaging system.
I can moderate the list of questions here. There's one from Palash. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I think my question is already answered. I was looking for a branch to like continue this work or maybe collaborate. But let's just hope we get that by Q1 of 2021.
Sounds good. Verdan?
Sure. So my question is mostly around the filtration part. Like there are multiple levels of Lineage. So would there be a possibility to filter out the levels of Lineage and also like to hide the deleted entities or to only show these specific entities, these kind of things?
We don't have any filtering per se. Like if you wanted to show only like Hive tables or something, or like show one level, we do kind of, by default, we kind of collapse the tree. And but filtering is a good idea. If you have any suggestions about like how we should filter, that's something we could take into account for Lineage down the line.
Yeah, I actually would second that. I think one of the big problems I anticipate here is that the really popular tables will get a very noisy graph all the way from things that are useful to things that are not useful, and finding a way to, in the context of table lineage, to filter out that noise. And sometimes that could be based on schema. So only show me all the downstream tables that are in this schema, or only show me tables that I have used in the last 30 days, things of that nature. Right now, I think the most meaningful to me seems like schema-based filtering, but there's probably better ways to think about that.
Yep.
Another quick point is like, as the ETL developers usually use staging tables that are more intermediary tables. So when you do lineage, the staging tables also show up, which is more noise than the actual table. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. And then there's a question from Chris around DBT integration.
Yeah, I was just curious if we'd be able to think, because I know a lot of companies like us at Com, we're using DBT, and because it already generates a graph and a gpickle file, if this tool would be able to just ingest that to help just match the way we have already set up our lineage in that tool.
Yeah, I think we are planning to build our own lineage ingestion framework eventually. I think as an intermediary solution, if we could integrate like a plugin solution to integrate like lineage data from different sources, that could be one model for implementation, similar to how we have like, extractors for different data sources. I think like getting different sources of lineage would be great. One example would be like using DBT as a source for lineage information and then ingesting that into like an Amundsen into the Neo4j. And then another example might be using CompilerWorks as a backing source. And then I think the end goal is to have our own, build our own extractors for Amundsen, so you don't need to rely on a third-party tool to do this.
Gotcha, makes sense.
Cool. The next one, I think Ruben's question got answered, but please chime in, Ruben, if that wasn't the case. I'm going to move to the next one, which is Dinan's question. Dinan, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, so we have a lineage table in our data warehouse. I'm just wondering if we will be able to leverage our existing table with this feature.
Yeah, I don't know what your native lineage looks like in your company. I think what we'll try to do again is to create a data model that's generic, and then allow people to use plugins. It's like a plugin model that you can connect to any different data source. I think you'll need to probably write your own conversion for that source, but hopefully all the other features should just work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think someone else could talk more technically about how that might work. Anyone have any?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it almost sounds like that we would have to support multiple ways of ingesting lineage into Amundsen. And then Amundsen, essentially, that data model will, the Amundsen data model will be a contract for how people will give that to Amundsen, and Amundsen displays that. And I would fully anticipate that for different kinds of sources, that data model may be partial, so it's not fully populated in terms of all the edges or all the nodes. But I think that would be fine. We just have to deal with it gracefully.
Yeah. One example, if you think about the dashboard integration, so we created a dashboard model which is very generic, and then we allow different connectors, for example, mode, or I forget what of the other integrations were called, but there's a couple that were built by the community. So I think it could work in a very similar model.
Yeah. Cool. I'm looking down the list of questions. I'm gonna make my judgment on whether they have been answered. So if they haven't been answered, I'm not ignoring. Please just chime in again. One that doesn't seem to have been answered is from Mariusz. You want to ask your question, Mariusz?
I was thinking out loud on the on the notification, because Daniel said that the email might be something that is overlooked. So there is an announcements feature which could be a kind of a notification hub for Lineage as well. It's just thinking out loud mostly, not a question.
Are you referring to? Oh, go ahead.
To the notify owners. So you said that you want to notify downstream table owners that something is broken, for example, and I was just thinking that maybe announcements section is a good place to also display this information. Like we were also internally thinking on notifying users if, for example, there is some outage in delivery of tables and stuff like that through announcements. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, we do have. Are you referring to the announcements on the homepage, like on the right side section?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to be a little bit careful about like what level of granularity you want to put in that announcement. Like if one table is broken, do you make an announcement for it? Is it like
just to the
like
affected people, like that?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that might take some deep level integration with kind of like a personalized announcements. I don't think we have anything planned for that yet.
But Daniel, taking that further, I think maybe announcements is one per the entire product, right? But if we were showing notifications of this on the table pages that were impacted,
right?
Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so we had some brainstorming around like putting banners around the affected tables, or letting people put temporary messages up on tables. So let's say there's a planned outage next week. So what people currently do is they edit the description to say, hey, there's going to be a planned outage on this date. And then they don't update it again. So that message stays there for like months after. And you're like, okay, why is this description here? It's not relevant. So one brainstorm that we had was to kind of allow like temporary banners that have an expiration, and then they go into like an archive section, which you can see like past little notifications on the table. Maybe one way we could do it is like when we do the messaging, we also add a temporary message on each table and then expire it after some time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I believe there's one question from Nirav.
Yeah. So I have a question about to track down the broken table. So let's say if we use the lineage to identify that my one of the KPIs onto the dashboard is having the low data, but my table is not broken. Maybe like means I have received the low data, or because of some problem, the table is not fully loaded. So using the lineage and the column states, would we be able to track down those tables?
So are you referring to like all of your ETLs are succeeding, and but there's some other error that is not being detected of like missing data? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think this particular use case will be able to fix that problem because we don't have any indication of the failure. So if there's missing data, I think your ETL needs to like send a failure message. So maybe there needs to be some tests or some status checks that are part of your ETL, so that when something goes wrong, it's marked as something goes wrong. Otherwise, it'll quietly fail and it'll, just go through with a green light. You need some way to detect that the data is missing. Maybe integration with like a health check is like a viable option. We do have plans to integrate with like a data quality service, but that's not part of this discussion right now. But it is something that we could integrate with. And so maybe in the lineage graph, not only do you show the ETL job status, but also like the data health quality status, which could be serviced in another way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Daniel or Marcos?
If we have time, I just have one question regarding the column level lineage. And I was particularly interested about the SQL. I don't know how much time you've spent on that, but you mentioned you would be able to pull up the SQL just for the column, or at least highlight that. Could you tell me what you've discussed?
Yeah, I think we have a very naive solution here is just show the full query and then highlight the sections of the query that, like just do a match with the column name and say if this line I think is most relevant here, let's highlight it. We don't have any smart parsing of the query to like say these parts aren't relevant, and so we're only going to look at this. That's not something that we have planned. But if someone has a smart solution, like we'd be cool to integrate that. But yeah, we were just planning on a naive, just like show the text, let the user read it. Don't modify the query in any way. Just let them see the raw value.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'll ask one more then. In the notification mechanism, it seemed like y'all had tables in there. Is there also dashboard owners included in that notification mechanism?
That's a great question. Currently, we're only planning to do table owners, but I think dashboard owners could be a good one as well. Yeah, that's a good point. We don't currently include dashboards as part of our lineage graph, although we do have those connections. So we technically do have that lineage information, but it's not part of the UI. Maybe something we could do is like put a filter around that and say show dashboards or show tables only. I don't know about showing dashboards as like a default.
Yeah.
Maybe just show the tables as by default and then allow people to see the dashboards afterwards.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, dashboards will be leaf nodes, and so they won't have any children.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it makes sense to, even if you could represent in the graph, it makes sense to like prioritize just the tables first and then deal with the dashboard stuff later.
Yeah, but it's a good idea to, or an area to expand. Yeah, there's a lot of good ideas coming in from this community. So thank you. One quick note about the notify downstream is like, do people have preferences about being able to choose what granularity they want to send it to, or just one level is fine?
I feel strongly that that about one level, and I feel that it's the next owner's responsibility to trickle it down further. And eliminating noise is pretty crucial for systems like these. But I would love to hear what others think.
If I can pipe in, I think that having both capabilities would be useful, because I could see for some use cases where, like in the provided example, there was like 400 or some odd downstream users that would be notified, and obviously that's not ideal. But for other cases, I could see that being a mechanism for like our upstream data team to notify everyone who's using the data that a new column is being added, or some data type is being changed that might significantly impact sort of everyone's work downstream. And a lot of times that announcement happens in various Slack channels with just @here and whatnot, and it would be really useful to have a more focused, like, these are the direct people who are impacted, and this is how it's going to affect you for everyone downstream.
Yeah,
makes sense.
I am slightly worried about, like, if someone does that on a major table and it's like your whole company gets notified, and it probably, there's like a possibility of getting multiple notifications, like one for each table that you own, if you own multiple tables.
I was gonna ask, would it be possible to do like a notify either one level or everyone, kind of like a choose which one and default to one level, but then if you wanted to notify everyone, you could switch to that?
Yeah. We currently have the 3 options in our design. We could easily make it 2. Also, another thing that we got feedback was about the opposite case of notifying upstream. And it seems like that is not something that people need. Is that also a correct assumption?
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be useful to be able to just, like, instead of notifying all downstream or some subset of downstream, literally just like copy to your clipboard the emails for downstream. So like, and maybe you would copy like various headings for the different levels. So like directly downstream, here's the emails, one level, here's the emails, and so on. And then that just gives me the power to like be as precise as I want with exactly who I email.
Yeah, that's a good idea. One thing that you lose with that is you lose the mapping between each owner and the table that is affected. So when you send the email through the interface, you can say like, hey, you're getting this email because this table that you own is being affected by this upstream table that we're changing. And then we could customize that email for each person that we send it to.
That's a good point.
But if if you just want to copy the emails and just to know who's affected, I guess that's another thing. We don't expose that information here in our design. We felt that the email list would be too big.
Cool. Well, thank you, Daniel, Marcos, for presenting, and I know the Lyft team is working on this, so I appreciate you taking the time to present. If you all have any questions, there's a Lineage channel on Slack, and you can also reach out to Daniel and Marcos directly too.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Cool.
Thank you.
So the next topic is something we haven't done before. So usually our community meetings have 1 or 2 presenters come and present on a topic. And what we wanted to do today is we wanted to have a discussion and share amongst each other how Amundsen is deployed. And there are these 3 questions that we put together to facilitate that discussion. So the first one is around how people apply customizations to Amundsen. The second one is how is Amundsen deployed in organizations? Is it using CI/CD? And the third one is how is Amundsen secured in organizations? And so this is open floor. Would love to hear what y'all think. And yeah, would love to share it, please.
Oh, hi.
We can go first if you want.
Or somebody else can go first. Or...
Sure. This was Verdan and Minsu. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Minsu, you want to go first, and Verdan, you can go second.
Oh, sure. I can go first. So for customizing Amundsen, so as far as using Amundsen, we have a bit of like ad hoc development compared to the other, like our other parts of our code base. So I would say that we, in terms of like not the non-data builder aspect, like the services, we would work on those locally. And then we build a Docker file that kind of integrates those changes. And then we kind of share that Docker file with our infrastructure engineers who push the images and kind of deploy it to an ECR where we pull it, we reference that in our Helm charts. And for the data builder case, we have like a staging cluster that we use for iterating on DAGs, and so that's much more closer probably to like the regular CI/CD flow that we have with other work. And then for managing it in CI/CD, so back to the services case, that's much more manual. It's again, kind of building these changes and then, transmitting that to another engineer to upload to an ECR via like a Docker file build. And then we kind of just rotate the tags. So we'll update the images and we'll have like a forward image, like, like 2.3b. And then what we'll do is we'll switch the Helm charts for our staging cluster to point to that image first. And then just make sure everything is working as, kind of like what we want. And then once that's good, then we'll switch the tag on the production and then production chart and then just roll the service. And for the data builder Airflow DAG aspect is like, is much more CI/CD natural with our Airflow cluster. And then for securing Amundsen, so this one is not my huge area of expertise. So our infrastructure handles a lot of the security. So my understanding is that, so for example, if we deploy Amundsen, or it could be like HTTP, but the TLS is handled by the load balancers and the proxies. And so what we do is our ingresses that are set up for Amundsen can only be accessed already. You have to be required to be connected to the VPN. So we already have that kind of firewall set up there. But then we also use Okta just to, just in case we want to like get into some RBAC stuff later, or in general, I think we in the org, we want to like add like Okta integration to as much tools as we can. And so we use the OIDC build for Okta as well. And then the weird gotcha, I guess, maybe from the ad hoc development experience of, going something from locally to the, and then pushing an image cluster-wide was getting the callbacks on Okta to work with this like TLS handoff. Like we had to use one of these like proxy fixes to basically forward the headers because that wasn't like happening properly. But that was just like a weird hiccup that from my own experience of setting that up.
Do y'all have multiple folks doing those customizations? Like, how do you coordinate between if you have local code on your laptop? Like, how do y'all coordinate that?
Not really. We're a pretty small team that's working on Amundsen. It's like only a few of us. Gotcha. And then we all work on like different parts, usually at the same time. So we're not, so that we're not like running into each other.
Is that code going into like a fork that you have?
Actually, not even. We don't really modify. We try to minimize the modifications onto the services, so we haven't actually forked it. We just kind of keep these kind of like lightweight modifications as well as like our Docker files on our main repos. Though we probably, now in hindsight, I'm thinking it would probably be easier just to like get the fork set up, but it'd probably take a little bit more work from like with our infrastructure just to kind of like get that all set up.
great. Thanks for sharing. Verdan, you want to share next?
Sure. So the first question is about customization. There's not much on the customization side for the ING because we try to work on in the original repository of Amundsen for all the three repositories, front-end, microservice, the metadata service, and the search service. So everything we apply, we try to push upstream. But even for small stuff like the statics is the major thing that we customize, usually because of the feature flags or because of the label changes or these kind of things, and we are doing that. So initially, when we started with Amundsen, we were under the impression that we would always use the Pi version of Amundsen, but then because of these customization, we moved to a point where we have the mirrored repository inside our GitLab, and using those mirrored repository, we are by using a script, we simply replace the statics and then build our front end on our local machine. Another customization is the announcement thing. So in order to introduce the announcement, we have to patch the setup.py file. That's the same process like during the build process. We patch the setup.py file. Another thing we have in terms of customization is a read-only page, which is like the data catalog, which you can access without actually logging into the system. That's a read-only page we implemented using the configuration. We do have the option to inject the custom routes in the front end, and using those routes, we have created a separate page using the same statics and the stylings and everything. We do have the read-only page, which basically shows the complete data sources, the list of the complete data sources that we have in the organization. Mariusz also has one thing that he recently built. Mariusz, are you there? Do you want to share?
Yes, I am audible. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, so the data catalog is one of the things we have in our navbar in the top, which is a feature of config to add this button, data catalog. And as Verdan mentioned, it takes you to the new blueprint in Flask. But we have another sub page for Amundsen, which is a documentation we have written for our users. And for that, we have went a different route than registering a blueprint. So we actually have a documentation as an nginx deployment on Kubernetes, and we just tweaked our ingress object, so it takes you to the different service when you use /docs path for Amundsen ingress front end. So it doesn't reside in the same container or pod that front-end application. It's a completely separate nginx pod with a service, and it just shares a route, an ingress object with the front-end application, I guess. And yeah, basically that's how we resolve in the documentation rendering and display, and all of those services are built through CI/CD and pushed to our private Artifactory registry.
Yeah, so basically, when we want to update Amundsen, we simply update our Git submodules using the GitLab feature for the mirrored repositories. And we don't really have the push to deploy mechanism. We work with the click to deploy mechanism. So every time there is a new feature or a feature branch, a new Helm chart is released. And then we do have a God repository or a super repository, because in our case, we do have multiple components, like so many different components. And using that God repository, we try to release all the latest version or the specified versions of the Helms. And it can be deployed to a cloud or on-premises system. So this is how we are doing the deployment part. The third one is the authorization and firewalling. So in terms of firewalling, I think that's this is being handled by our infra team more majorly on the network level. Again, this is something that Amundsen is something that is not really accessible by the public user or even the organization users. So you need to connect to the VPN and go inside the VPN to access the system. And in terms of authorization, we are using OIDC backed by the key clock, and key clock is connected with the LDAP of the IMG. So this is how we are doing the authorization. Any questions? No?
I have a question. I'm curious if there is a documentation about the process that you're doing, or to learn more about the process, because I'm very new to Amundsen and would like to basically follow the standard steps to deploy Amundsen. And just I have one question, another question about the authentication that you said using VPN. I think, can we use Cloudflare in AWS to basically do the same thing, just give access to organization users to enter that endpoint or domain that we have?
You mean using the OIDC authentication or using the firewalling, the VPN stuff?
So just I mean, give the access to right people basically to access to the user interface. So can we just use like load balancer and Cloudflare in the AWS to do that routing?
I have no idea. I never used this thing. Mariusz, do you know anything about it?
No, unfortunately, I have never heard about this product either.
No. And in terms of the process, you mentioned.
How is it called, the product? AWS?
Yeah, so Cloudflare and load balancer, I mean, that combination. Yeah.
Okay.
And you mentioned about the process. Yeah. So yes, there is already one Helm chart, the official Helm chart, but it's not really available with the Atlas, since we are using Atlas. And in our case, we do use or rely on the init containers, the HashiCorp vault for the security and these kind of things. So we are actually planning to open source our chart anytime sooner. So yeah, there definitely would be a documentation around it.
Thank you very much.
That's it from our end.
Okay, probably I can share some of the steps that we follow in Rapido for deploying Amundsen. On the first point, like how we customize Amundsen, basically we actually are waiting for a plugin based model where like we can build features on top of Amundsen to, completely vertically, means like we build the front end components and then we build some of the back end components, and somehow we add this entire plugin into the system, just like a packaged wheel or zip file or just some artifacts. But we are always trying to stay away from rebuilding it from the source or modifying from the source. Mostly what we do when we have like a pushing requirement, we do add some patches on our Helm chart, which is basically nothing but simple shell scripts, which does some find and replace kind of thing or some kind of modification into the Python files at the startup. And we do a similar issue raise or a pull request on public Amundsen. So we want the changes to go for everyone instead of keeping it with us on our own private repositories. So and another point why we wanted to avoid the continuous integration part of Amundsen on our side is basically the regression, which is like what if we are breaking any feature of Amundsen, or what if we do a sync with the latest master of Amundsen and that breaks one of our features. So for that we need to run a lot of test cases, and maybe over time we need to fix those tests, and that's the overhead. So we avoided that part totally. What we do basically for the Helm charts, every month or every 15 days, we choose a most stable Docker image version from the public Docker hub, and we hardcode the Docker SA there. Instead of adding the tag, we use the SA because what we found in past is like the tags are mutable for public Docker Hub. So if we are like today, I am testing something with, let's say, version 2.4.1, it may not work on future because the 2.4.1 is getting modified. Maybe there was some problem in the CI/CD scripts, but yeah, for a safety purpose, we are using SHA. On the load balancer and in networking part, yes, we are also using Ingress, and ours is not inside VPN. So very few products like Metabase or this catalog, we are keeping it outside VPN, and it is obviously HTTPS secured. Login and authentication is provided by Keycloak, and Keycloak is connected with Google, Google is our primary walkthrough provider, and Keycloak is just working as a YDC Federation provider. Next part is the authorization part. Since in our case, the catalog data is actually held inside Atlas, and Amundsen is just working like a good looking UI on top of Atlas. So what we do, we delegate users tokens directly to Atlas, and Atlas is connected with Apache Ranger, where we have like entire organization level authorization, like who has access to which part of data, even it's granular up to which column of a specific table. So yeah, Amundsen just does the identification of the user by passing the tokens to Atlas, and rest of the things are handled in Atlas. Yeah, that's more or less about our authorization. One particular thing which we did slightly different from others, I guess, is we have very wide range auto scaling features on Amundsen. So like during the night time, we run only single pod for all the Amundsen services, and based on the load on the application, we scale it up. We are using Kubernetes horizontal pod autoscaler for it. On that, Flask YDC has a little trouble when we are not connecting any database with Amundsen, and since we already said we are looking at Amundsen as a fancy front end on top of our catalogs, which is Atlas, so we are not dedicating any database to Amundsen. So the problem is the front end tokens and the ID tokens are securely saved inside the SQLite DB of the front end Amundsen front end app. And when you are using multiple pods, if one user is logged in on one pod and later the load balancer sends that user to a different pod, they basically gets logged out. So to solve that problem, what we did so far is creating Nginx sticky session. So if I am assigned to a particular pod, I will always be assigned to that pod. Yeah.
Got it. Cool. Thank you, Palash. If you have any questions or comments on Palash's deployment, please reach out to him. In interest of time, we're going to give it to Madison. Madison, you want to share how you deploy?
Yeah, I'll just be super quick because we're still in the sort of proof of concept phase for Amundsen. But one step that made deployment easier for us is we have some, I believe, ECS machines or some ECS clusters that we have available for just ad hoc projects. And so what we were able to do is take the Docker Compose file that's provided with Amundsen that works with Neo4j and use with some additional parameters in a separate YAML file, use the ECS CLI to just deploy that directly to ECS. And that's been super easy for us to just put something up that's not just running on my machine, but is actually accessible to people within our org for trying some of this stuff out. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome, thank you. Now is open floor for any questions or comments y'all have.